everyone, it's Sevi. Whether you lost your 50/50s to her or purposely tried to summon her, acting Grandmaster Jean is a great character and team player. So to help you build Jean, I've finally put together this highly requested guide. As always, it will cover her talents, gameplay, constellations, best artifact builds, weapons, and best team comps. Let's begin!
As the wind continues to blow, so too shall I continue to fight.
The fun thing about Jean is that she can be played either as an Anemo healer support or on-field DPS. Let's explore how her talents can lean into these potential roles. Jean's normal attacks consist of a 5-hit combo physical damage attack with relatively high multipliers rivaled by Kaya and Ayaka, which encourages some to actually build her for physical damage auto attacks. Upon getting her first passive talent, Jean can heal her entire party through normal attacks. This healing scales off her attack stat, not the damage she does. Another unique property is in her charged attacks, wherein hitting enemies with it will lift them up momentarily. This can be useful for disabling them or setting up fall damage. If you prefer playing Jean as an on-field DPS, then you're at least simultaneously healing your team while juggling enemies in the air, which can be a fun mechanic befitting the Anemo character she is. Adding to her Anemo arsenal is her skill, which can either be pressed or held. Pressing it unleashes a blast of Anemo in front of her, which deals Anemo damage, swirls elements, and sends light enemies flying. It's also how she generates Anemo particles, which will help battery her or another teammate. Holding the skill is where it gets fun, as it makes Jean a stationary vacuum cleaner, sucking in small enemies in front of her and lifting them up if they're light enough. As long as you hold it, Jean's stamina continuously gets reduced for a maximum of 5 seconds. Then letting go sends them flying away to your desired direction. This is one way to clear the battlefield and get some breathing space, but it also opens up one of Jean's best mechanics, which is abusing fall damage on enemies. Basically, just gather and lift up enemies, then blast them upwards. Then watch the fall damage they take upon hitting the ground. This can be helpful for early Spiral Abyss floors. Rather than going through all the trouble, your enemies will literally fall for Jean and be too stunned to get back up. Use this to also send enemies flying off cliffs or drowning them in water in the open world. You can also combine the suction with the charged attack to get another instance of fall damage. Launch the enemies with your charged attack, look at the ground, hold your E, and the pull will force the enemies to hit the ground and take fall damage, then launch them again in the air for another instance of fall damage. Jean's burst is the most complex part of her kit. On the surface, it looks simple. Casting it makes Jean summon an Anemo field that instantly heals a lot of HP of the entire team, and the healed amount scales off her attack. Staying inside the field heals your active character periodically too. This team-wide instant healing is a more unique trait, as most other healers in the game do their heals over time and or only on the active character, whereas Jean does both upon casting and throughout the burst duration. As such, it's a nice safety net for dangerous scenarios such as fighting corrosion. It also deals an instance of Anemo damage upon casting. After that, it doesn't deal any more damage while enemies stay in the field. Rather, enemies have to enter or exit the boundary of the field in order to receive Anemo damage. This damage mechanic can be comboed with her skill. While the field is active, hold her skill and draw in enemies. Enemies outside the field will take Anemo damage as they get sucked in, then blast them out the field and they'll take exiting damage too. You can also do this fun thing where while the enemies are trapped in Jean's vortex, you just continuously pass them back and forth over her burst's boundary to keep damaging them. Of course, you wouldn't want to do this in time-sensitive challenges as it wastes a lot of field time, but otherwise it's a fun mechanic. The more interesting mechanic of her burst is how it applies Anemo on your character. While it seems inconsequential, it actually has useful benefits. First, the Anemo application gets rid of any elemental aura debuff on your character, which is useful against annoying debuffs or avoiding unwanted reactions. And 2, it swirls whatever element is on you, which can deal elemental damage to nearby enemies and apply the elemental aura on them as well. It's this unique interaction that makes the so-called Sunfire Jean combo possible, which I'll discuss in the team comp section. So this is Jean's kit. It's a combination of dealing anemo damage, swirling, and healing, but she can also be built as an on-field physical DPS. It all depends on which aspect of her kit you want to lean into. She's also really fun to use in the open world, so you can play around with enemies and exploit environmental advantages. As for the talent level priority, if you plan on using her purely for her anemo and healing kit, then leave the normal attack unleveled and just level up her burst and skill. In fact, if she's purely for swirling, then talent levels don't matter for swirl damage since it's only based on the character level and EM stat. If you're using her as an on-field DPS, then level up her normal attacks, then skill, then get her burst to at least level 6 and increase as you see fit, mainly for the healing. Now, pulling Jean copies isn't something you can really target, and you'll just have to get lucky or unlucky. So what do you gain by increasing her constellations? Let's go through them quickly. C1 makes her skill pull and hit harder as long as you can hold it for 1 second. If you like using Jean's skill to crowd control or launch enemies in the air, this is a minor but quality of life buff. C2 is an interesting constellation that benefits specific teammates to increase their DPS output ever so slightly via faster attacks. For example, Ayato can insert 1 or 2 more attacks during his skill stance, which is slightly more damage in the same amount of time. C2 Jean is a nice addition to her support utility if you have the right characters to use it. C3 just increases her burst level, a small damage and healing bump. C4 is a strong but niche constellation as it offers one of the very rare ways to shred anemo resistance via her burst. It's a 40% decrease, which is quite a lot. For instance, if you pair this with Xiao, that's a significant damage bump for him. At the very least, it increases Jean's damage too and incentivizes using her skill after her burst to squeeze out more damage. C5 just increases her skill level. Finally, C6 is a huge boost in your team's survivability, as not only does Jean provide lots of healing with her base kit, but C6 also decreases the damage taken by teammates affected in her field. If you actually manage to get this, then Jean should have even less problems, if any at all, in keeping your team alive. Jean's artifact choice is dependent on how you're building her from being the main DPS to a support healer, so let's discuss her best artifacts in relation to her playstyles. We'll start with her elemental mastery and swirl-oriented gameplay. With this, you want to stack as much EM as you can on her, plus enough energy recharge to let her burst reliably. That means aiming for full EM artifacts, but the sands could be either EM or ER, depending if you need to supplement her ER. Aiming for around 160 to 180% ER is a good baseline to ensure burst uptime, since the burst will be a major source of swirls too. This can go higher or lower depending on different scenarios. For lower AR players, the ER artifacts Exile and Scholar are highly recommended, as well as the Instructor set for more EM and its EM team buffing effect. But the end goal eventually is the 4-piece Viridescent for shredding enemy resistance and increasing swirl damage. This will make Jean's swirls the best they can be while simultaneously supporting your DPSs. If she's used primarily for healing, you might think to go with either the Maiden's Beloved or Ocean-Hued Clam sets. You can go for their full 4-piece effects or just combine the 2-piece with other sets, and those will make her heals better. Though even without healing bonus artifacts, she can already heal well enough. As such, you can just throw on whatever other attack sets you might have with good substats. A double 2-piece attack set is a very cheap combo, and can be enough to just make your Jean functional enough to heal. However, I should emphasize that a 4-piece VV is still the way to go if she's acting as a healer support. Not only are you healing the team, but you're shredding elemental resistance too. This role consolidation is valuable, especially for teams that want to increase its damage potential but are lacking healing. Basically, if she's not your on-field DPS, then the 4-piece VV should be your main target for maximizing Jean's utility. If your goal is to increase her damage output via her physical or anemo damage, then you want offensive artifacts with crit, attack, ER, and damage bonus stats. Her circlet will be for crit depending on which stat needs more balancing. The goblet can either be anemo or physical damage goblet depending on preference, or a really good attack percent goblet can be used to buff both anemo and physical damage, albeit not as well as a damage bonus goblet. Then the sands will be attack percent. As for the low AR sets, the Sojourner, Braveheart, and Berserker sets offer attack and crit rate buffs for the 2-piece effect and further damage boosting effects for their 4-piece sets. The Martial Artist is another interesting choice, but only if you're using her auto attacks as her main damage source, since its set effects complement that playstyle. Then, for late game artifacts, it depends if she's more of a physical or animo DPS. You can use physical damage artifacts paired with attack boosting sets for cheaper 2-piece combos. If you're aiming for full sets, the Gladiator's Finale is a very viable choice. Jean can keep up the Pale Flame effect, but it's a very tight window since her skill cooldown is 6 seconds and the Pale Flame buff lasts only for 7 seconds. As such, it might be better to stick to the Gladiator's Finale set for convenience and resin efficiency. For animo damage, there's the Viridescent Venerer 2-piece set, which can be combined with other attack sets, Emblem for ER, and Noblesse for burst damage. As for the weapons, it's a similar case with Jean's artifacts that they'll depend on how they complement her role. For organization, I categorize the options into energy, EM, and attack crit weapons. Starting with swords that provide energy utility, our free-to-play choices are the 3-star Skyrider sword to give her ER and attack percent, then a solid upgrade and a 4-star choice is the craftable Inazuma sword Amenoma Kageyuchi. Jean's team rotations usually have 2 skill uses, so you can make good use of its stacking mechanic to refund your energy and cut down your ER needs. Then the Favonius sword, I think, is the best option for energy utility, as it provides the most ER while helping battery the team by generating particles. As a result, your team's energy needs can be better addressed and rotations can feel smoother. This makes Jean an even better support. The Sacrificial Sword is also an option to provide a decent ER while having a fun mechanic that refreshes your skill cooldown. This can help generate another round of animo particles, but it can also be abused for fall damage. However, the Favonius sword is my preference as it has the better energy utility while also taking less field time. The Skyward Blade is your only 5-star energy sword pick. It's pretty good as it adds a lot of ER and gives a lot of base attack for more damage. However, a Favonius sword is at least cheaper to get and ascend while offering more team utility from its particle generation. These ER swords are compatible with an EM and Healer Jean build, and this will usually complement her sands, so that if you have an EM or attack sands on her, then you'll get her ER needs mainly from her weapon instead. Then when it comes to EM weapons, there are 4 choices: the Dark Iron Sword, Iron Sting, Alley Flash, which is used more for its base attack than EM stat anyway, and the Freedom Sworn. Their power and utility increases the rarer they are, the best being Freedom Sworn for its team damage buff. My main note is that you'll likely want to use an ER Sands instead if you have an EM weapon, just to make sure that her energy needs aren't neglected, since her burst can also be a primary source of swirl damage. Now, if Jean's being built as a DPS, then slapping on any DPS-focused sword works for her. Since there are many viable weapons, let me just mention the most notable options. My free-to-play recommendations I'd give are the Amenoma again, which works on any build, and the Prototype Rancor for an on-field physical DPS build. Alternatively, you can buy the Blackcliff Longsword from Paimon's shop to build her crit damage instead, but its damage potential is very limited by how well you can keep up the passive stacking effect, which is why sticking to the Amenoma is still a better idea. The Battle Pass Black Sword is a good option for building her crit stats, and its passive effect synergizes by improving her auto attack damage and improving her survivability via self-heals. Then for the 5-star options, the overall best pick would be the Jade Cutter, simply for how convenient it is to plug and play on her, and the sheer amount of crit rate it already provides. Jean also has a surprisingly high base HP of 14,695. In fact, it's tied with Zhongli at 2nd place, beaten only by Hu Tao. This makes it so that the HP scaling effect of the Jade Cutter gets more value compared to on other characters. Other available attack and crit 5-star weapons will work at the very least as stat sticks for her, but the convenience and universality of Jade Cutter is unmatched. The Aquila Favonia is the other 5-star option, which is focused on a physical build. It's still a good 5-star pick, despite its physical damage stat, due to its high base attack and attack buff and triggered effect. If you got one and have no other 5-star option, then put it on her instead. Finally, for team comps, Jean is actually very flexible as an Anemo support or main DPS. Any team that requires an Anemo Viridescent Venerer Shredder can be filled in by Jean, and she also consolidates the role of healer, making her a useful 2-in-1 unit. The main caveat as an Anemo unit is that she doesn't have the same crowd control potential as Sucrose, Venti, or Kazuha, but for her other utilities she'll do the job well. You can also treat Jean as a good alternative to Bennett. Many teams that like having Bennett can instead use Jean as well, and rather than Bennett's attack buff, you're instead shredding elemental resistance for the damage boost, while both of them are the healer. The main advantage of this is it frees up Bennett for another team that might want him more. There are team templates that synergize well with Jean's utility. She's a solid pick for Taser and Freeze teams if you don't have other Anemo options. She'll keep your enemies' resistances shredded and ensure your team will survive. It's also easy to insert her into rotations thanks to her short skill cooldown and as long as you address her energy needs. She can also pair well in a double Anemo team, which will likely be with Venti, Kazuha, or Xiao. With Venti and Kazuha, the idea is to pair them up with other elemental units and abuse your skills, bursts, and elemental infused damage and swirl damage on top of resistance shredding. With Xiao, Jean will mainly act as his battery and healer, and this is often combined with a double Geo. The idea is to funnel Jean's energy particles to Xiao, and it would help if you had the Favonius sword for more battery utility. If you have C4 Jean, which reduces Anemo resistance, then double Anemo teams become more potent with her. Then there's a very interesting combo called Sunfire, which is composed of Jean and Bennett. How does it work? I mentioned in my talents discussion that Jean's burst continuously applies Anemo on your active character, thereby swirling the element on you and dealing damage to nearby enemies. Now, Bennett's burst has a unique property too, where it continuously reapplies Pyro on the active character inside the field. So if you put together Jean's burst and Bennett's burst, the interaction of Anemo and Pyro on your character causes it to swirl the Pyro and thus deal Pyro damage around you every second. Then you can pair this with different elemental characters for Pyro-based reaction teams. There's the Ganyu Sunfire team, which involves Ganyu proccing reverse melt with her charged attacks from Pyro reapplication of the Sunfire effect. Electro characters like Fischl or Raiden combined with Sunfire Jean will make an overload team. Hydro characters like Child, Xingqiu, or Ayato can use Sunfire Jean to vaporize, or even better, combine Hydro and Electro as an electrocharge combo with the Sunfire combo to create what is called an Overvape Sunfire team, so called for the overload, vaporize, and electrocharge reactions it produces. And that's going to be all for this updated Jean build guide. If you have Jean and you're planning on building her, I would love to know below if she's going to be your support or your main DPS, or maybe a hybrid of both. Leave it in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel for more Genshin Impact guides and content, and I will see you all soon. Take care!